Welcome back to the show where we run you through all the Dolphins news you need to know about. And we're going to be running you through all 11 selections the Miami Dolphins made in the 2020 NFL Draft. And after that, we're going to run you through the fan Q&A where we answer fans' questions. But before we get into all the selections the Dolphins made in the 2020 NFL Draft, I want to point out one thing that I thought was very interesting that really played out in the 2020 NFL Draft. I thought the report, and this was months, I think it was at least a month before the draft that came out, and I can't remember who it was. I can't remember if it was ESPN, but it really did happen in the 2020 NFL Draft. They said there has never been a draft in an offseason where the sports media and NFL general managers and scouts, there's never been a bigger divide into where they have players ranked on their draft board. And I really thought that played out in the 2020 NFL Draft. We saw a lot of players, really, and a lot of talent get pushed down to the second round. We saw corners get pushed way up in the draft, which the run on corners in the first round was very unexpected. The tackles, I thought we all pretty much knew that the tackle run was going to be crazy in the first round, and it was. That played out pretty much. It's just the order was a little bit different than we thought, but that pretty much played out how we thought it would. But everything else, man, you think about some of the big names and players that I really liked that fell to the second round that I thought for sure were first rounders. You think about Josh Jackson from Houston, AJ Epinesa from Iowa, Xavier McKinney from Alabama. Those are some very good players that not only fell from the first round, but fell in the second round, and some fell all the way to the third round. Just really surprising stuff. And I thought that report earlier in the year that they said, where NFL teams have some of these players are wildly different than what you see in mock drafts and some of the sports analysts and what they're telling you on sports shows. And I really thought that came out in this draft, and it was pretty dang different. You think about some of the players that really fell in this draft. Clearly, general managers felt very differently than and some of the leaks that came out, which is a lot different than what we saw in sports media. And I thought that played out in the 2020 NFL Draft. With that being said, let's get into the selections, ladies and gentlemen. I am very excited. I thought I had a great time watching the draft. I was glued to my seat in that first round. That first round was very intense. It was very nervous. So let's get into the first round. And with the first selection the Dolphins made in the 2020 NFL Draft was Tua Tagovailoa. Now, everyone knows who listens to this show. I've been a huge Tua fan for the last 2 years. It really does seem like I've been talking about this particular player for 2 years, or at least a year and a half on this show. I'm a huge Tua fan. I only had Joe Burrow ahead of him due to injury like everybody else. I was very, very scared. I think we all were. With the smoke screens before the draft, especially with some of the things 2 days before the draft. If you're not familiar with the history of this team and you really haven't been paying attention in terms of like the deep weed stuff, really the first round draft picks for this franchise have been predicted by beat writers around the Dolphins, especially like a day or 2 days or 3 days before the draft. The Christian Wilkins pick was predicted like a day or 2 or 3 days away from the draft, and some of the rumors that were coming out before the draft, like a day or 2 before, the whole we wanted to trade up for a tackle thing was really making me nervous. I'm serious. I mean, I was like, if we trade up to take Andrew Thomas or Mekhi Becton or some of these tackles, I might have thrown myself through a window because it just didn't make any sense. We already had the 5th overall pick. We would have gotten one of those tackles. I think all of those guys, I loved all of those guys as players. I thought they were all going to be very good. You're still going to get your pick of the litter at 5. And we saw Mekhi Becton fall away to the Jets, so we would have been able to get a tackle. So all of those things made me very nervous for that 5th pick. I was pacing back and forth. I was very nervous that especially at when the Lions came up, there was heavy rumors that we were trying to trade up with them, and then we would take the tackle. It was the most nervous I've been in a draft in probably ever. And the fact that we were able to get Tua, not only the fact that we picked Tua, because I really didn't think we would, and the fact that we picked him, didn't have to give up anything for him, I think is the best outcome this franchise could have came away with a top 5 pick. I mean, I was so happy when we picked Tua Tagovailoa, and I hope most Dolphins fans were. I know some of you that listen to the show and that participate in the fan Q&A are very concerned about his injuries, and for me, this was the best outcome to get Tua. I know somebody, like I said, some of you feel a little bit different. I don't. I really do feel like this guy is going to be a franchise quarterback. Hopefully with some of the picks that we picked in this draft work out, because obviously we put an emphasis on the front, and I think that's something that we all wanted us to do, is really address the fronts and offense and defense, line of scrimmage on offense and defense. And we will get into that here in a second, but very happy with that outcome there. I mean, I could not be more happy. I mean, Tua was my favorite player coming into this draft. He was my favorite quarterback coming into this draft. He's been one of my favorite players to watch college football for the last few years, and I'm very, very excited that he's going to put on the aqua and orange. It's got me very, very excited. So let's get into the next pick. And this next pick is a very weird and controversial pick that I really don't understand. And I don't know if it's because of some of the media members aren't like super ecstatic about it. And I even said myself that if all of the top tackles are off the board, because if you guys remember, Andrew Thomas was projected to fall to the 14th to 16th pick, somewhere in there. So I felt like if Andrew Thomas fell that far, I love Andrew Thomas. I think he's one of the best tackles in this draft. And I felt like if he fell that far, we would trade up and get him. And I even said before the draft, not to be a hypocrite, because I did say this, that if all of the top tier tackles were gone, Andrew Thomas, Mekhi Becton, Jedrick Wills, I wasn't the biggest Wharfs fan from Iowa, but if those guys were gone, then you should probably look to a different position if you're there at 18. We didn't. We ended up selecting Austin Jackson. Here's the thing about this pick. Number one, I don't know really where to start on this pick, because I want to go a lot of different ways here. Let's start with the, anger around this pick with some fans, or maybe if you do, you might not. But if you do have questions about this pick, let's put all of those out on the table. Number one, this is where he was projected to go. So people saying it's a reach, for me, is a little weird. And if you think it's a bad pick, I think you're wrong. Because number one, this is many places, this is where he was projected to go. A lot of mock drafts had us taking him. There are a variety of different opinions on Austin Jackson. He had a rough offseason. He didn't have an offseason due to the fact that he was, he donated bone marrow to his sister. So that hurt him. He's really young. He's only 20 years old. And, he has a little bit, his competition in some of the pass rushers he played. He did play some good ones like AJ Epinesa. I'm a bigger fan of SEC linemen and Big Ten linemen than I am really of anywhere else. So maybe that has some trepidation when you look at Austin Jackson as a franchise left tackle. But with all that being said, I just really don't understand, I guess, the questions about him in terms of, like, why would the Dolphins pick him there? Is he a reach? I didn't think so. I was like, yeah, I mean, when his name was announced, I wasn't surprised. I know we needed offensive linemen. I mean, the offensive linemen last year, somehow we were a top 10 passing offense the last 2 months of the season. We finished 12th overall. How that happened is a testament to Ryan Fitzpatrick. I don't know, because if you go back and watch that offensive line last year, it was in shambles. We didn't have a running game. We couldn't play action pass. It was really, really bad. The only thing we really could do, we were a very one-dimensional team because of it. The only thing we could do is really just let Ryan Fitzpatrick win his games in the shotgun. So this is a pick that needed to happen. Was he the best player available for me? No, he wasn't. I'm going to be completely honest with you. Do I think it was a reach? No. Do I think it fills a huge need? Absolutely. It's going to be interesting to see how good he is. And listen, no one knows how any of these guys are going to work out. I mean, the draft is infamous for that in any sport. No one knows how any of these guys are going to work out. So I'm very excited to see what he does in training camp. And if we even have a training camp, or any offseason or preseason, if we even have that. I'm excited to see what this guy can do. Because again, some of the, questions on tape, or because, some people attribute that to the fact that he really didn't have an off season due to some of the off the field issues he's had with, his sister and all that other stuff. There's some of the reasons he kind of got off really slow. A lot of, people point out the fact that he finished really strong at the end of the year for USC. So I'm excited. I know he has a lot of talent. He's really young. I think he was the youngest player in the draft. He's only 20 years old. So there are questions. Is he more of a project? I think it was Jeff Darlington reported that the Dolphins really liked that he had a lot of starts under his belt, and they think they can, because of that, they felt comfortable picking in there, and they think they can get him up to speed really quickly. So it sounds like the Dolphins want him to start, and I know that's not how Brian Flores does things. Whoever is the best man wins. So I'm excited to see his growth this offseason. Because he obviously fills a huge need, and I'm hopeful that he can play as fast as possible. But when you look at him as of right now, he's young. He is a little bit of a project. I think it fills a huge need. I'm completely fine with this pick. Was I jumping out of my chair with this pick? No, I wasn't. But I really do like this pick. It fills a huge need, and hopefully he can become the franchise left tackle. I don't want to sound down on this pick because I'm not. I'm ecstatic that for once this organization and this franchise prioritize the line of scrimmage, because if you've been a Dolphins fan over the last 5 years, you've seen some of the worst line of scrimmage play in the history of this franchise. It's time to stop, ladies and gentlemen. And I really do feel like the direction this franchise went in is the right one when it comes to the line of scrimmage. And the last thing I'll say on Austin Jackson, no one knows. This guy could be Anthony Munoz, for God's sakes, coming out of USC. No one knows how any of these guys are going to play in the NFL. You just can't. You can't know. You can just project how they will play based on how they played in a lower level of competition. Who knows how well Austin Jackson will play? It fills a huge need. I know that. I'm excited to see what he'll do. And for the fans that complain about us prioritizing the line of scrimmage, you people are crazy. That's all I have to say about that. I honest to God don't know what football you've been watching over the last few years, but you win by building the trenches. There's no doubt about that. If you look at some of the best teams in the league, and the teams that were in the Super Bowl, both had really good offensive lines, especially the 49ers, that you have to start there. If you build the line of scrimmage right, that can take you a long way. It can make a lot of things on your team that aren't so greater if you have strong lines of scrimmage. So, like I said, I think it's a little hypocritical for fans to be a little disappointed that we didn't pick more receivers or running backs or even a safety at that position. I love that the Dolphins are prioritizing the line of scrimmage, and that makes me love the Austin Jackson pick that much more. And I trust Brian Flores and Chris Grier as a tandem. So I'm very confident that this guy will be developed the right way and can be a starter on that offensive line for years to come. So I did like the pick, even though he wasn't. If I was on the in terms of excitement, he wasn't very high in terms of, I guess, the excitement meter of being picked, because there were some players left there. But actually, if you think about it, with the players that were left over, unless you're a huge Ruiz fan, depending on where you think he should have gone, there wasn't a lot there left for me to be like, I cannot believe they passed on him. I mean, I guess if you love Patrick Queen, maybe a Kenneth Murray, someone like that, but those positions aren't that big of a deal. I think we have talented players at the linebacker spot. So if you really break it down, the Dolphins really did the right thing in picking Austin Jackson for the reasons that I have stated, in my opinion. So let's move on to the third and final first-round pick the Dolphins had. And this is the first one that really had me scratching my head. And it's an interesting pick, to say the least. But the last pick of the first round is Noah Igbinoghene. I don't know if I'm... Listen, I have a track record with names, and it's not very good on this show. So stick with me here. Noah Igbinoghene... I'm not going to say his name again. You guys get it. Played... I don't know... This hasn't been talked about enough, but his first 2 years at Auburn played wide receiver. But let's look at the optics of this before I get into the player. This is the one pick that I was like, wow, that came out of left field. The Austin Jackson pick did not come out of left field. I really did feel like we were going to take an offensive lineman there, and I'm glad that we did. This one really came out of left field, like I just said. I don't want to repeat myself. I could not have guessed the Dolphins were going to take a DB at this position unless it was a safety. But to take a corner here is really interesting. Came out of left field. I've said that 3 times. It was just really, really surprising that they went in this direction. And I think it really emphasizes the point of how Brian Flores wants to build this team. We talked about this in free agency. Bill Belichick really prioritized the secondary. That's the only real position they've really invested money in with, over the years with the Darrelle Revis signing, the extension of Doug McCourty in the past. Obviously, they gave Stephon Gilmore a lucrative deal, and they don't really normally do that. And when you look at what the Patriots, how they build their team, they build the secondary first, and then they go to the defensive front. So from the back end to the front is really how they build their team, and you see that here in Miami. The Dolphins really prioritizing secondary members and getting as much talent there as possible. So I thought that really, and again, the whole Byron Jones signing, I didn't see that coming either. In terms of one of their biggest free agent get was a corner. So I think you can really see how the Dolphins really want to build this defense. And I think Noah here is a really a great sign of that. So let's get into the player. It did surprise me a little bit when you look at some of the players that were still left on the board. You have Xavier McKinney, Antoine Winfield. You had Epinesa there if you want to go with the front 7. But the Dolphins chose not to do that. They went with, you had DeAndre Swift left. Clyde Edwards-Helaire was still on the board at this point. But the Dolphins chose to go corner. This is probably my least favorite pick of the draft. Just being honest. Don't want to be negative here. This was definitely my least favorite pick. I thought the Dolphins could have gone in different directions here, and picked up a talented player that they have needs at. But they chose to go corner. And again, this is how they want to build the team. I'm totally for it. It's worked for New England. They add another DB in their room, another talented DB. And I think something that's not being pointed out enough with this particular player is he switched from receiver to DB. I didn't really hear anybody talk about that a lot. His last year at Auburn, he made the switch. Very productive. If you watch him play, get some of literally his competition that he played, you could not have harder competition in football. And when you watch him play, and this is his career stats and this again, he only had 1 year at corner at Auburn. Excuse me. He has 1 interception. He had 2.5 tackles for loss, and 1 forced fumble. And again, the competition that he played at Auburn was very high. He was the best corner, I think, on the number 1 ranked defense in the nation. He played Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, the trio of receivers that Alabama had, obviously with Henry Ruggs, Jerry Jeudy, Donovan Smith, all of those guys. So he had to play really good competition, and especially in the Alabama game, he played very well. One of the things that surprised me watching him is his ability to tackle, which I thought was really interesting. He's a really good open field tackler, so he fits the criteria there in terms of what the Dolphins want in their corners. He's a fast dude. He played 90% press man, which is a lot to put on a corner, especially in the SEC, like I said, with those guys. And in the LSU game, I thought he played really, really well. He only gave up 1 touchdown, which, listen, if you're playing that much press man against probably the best passing attack in college football history with that particular team, I mean, it's going to happen. It's like a shot blocker. You're going to get dunked on. So I thought he played both of those teams very well against the hardest competition he was going to face in college football, the closest thing he's going to have to the NFL, and he did a very, very, very good job. And again, all this dude does is press man. He's not afraid of it, which I love about his game, and that fits perfectly into the scheme. Press man to man is something that we do a lot in Miami, especially we do a lot of cover 1, and when Brian Flores was in New England, they were a very aggressive defense, did a lot of cover 1 defenses. We didn't get to do that a lot last year due to the fact that we just didn't have a lot of talented players to cover, and obviously he's going to help us in that department. It adds a lot of competition to the room. It's going to be crazy to see how the secondary shakes out with, I thought Nick Needham had a good year. I mean, he started off terribly and then really finished the year strong. Bobby McCain is still in circulation. It's going to be interesting to see where he ends up throughout the season, because I really like this guy. Watching him, it really surprised me. Of like I said, how physical he was. He's a really good athlete. Obviously, his family, his mother, and I think his parents were Olympic sprinters or something like that. So he comes from an athletic background, and his speed really did show up when you watched him. And very physical corner, and for his size, can tackle, man. Really good open field tackler. It's gonna be interesting to see if the Dolphins try him out in free safety. Because in this defense, you really have to be versatile. You have to be able to cover man-to-man against slot receivers, tight ends, and running backs. He obviously can do that at Auburn. I mean, he was guarding some of the best receivers in the draft throughout his year there at Auburn. So it's going to be, and he's a really good open field tackler, a physical player, man. I'm interested to see if he can make that. I mean, he made the transition from receiver to corner very well. It paid off for him, obviously, in the long run. I'm excited to see what position he plays in the Dolphins secondary. I mean, they have a great track record. I mean, literally in midseason, the Dolphins transitioned Eric Rowe to strong safety, and he played very well at that position. So, a lot in this defense, what you're asked to do is really what a slot corner has to do in terms of coverage. Like I said, a lot of cover one blitzes. So you have to cover at safety in this defense. And it's going to be interesting to see if they, because of how physical he is and because he's such a good open field tackler, if they transition him to free safety, which is obviously a huge, huge need. I think he's going to be tried out at both positions, and it's going to be interesting to see who ultimately ends up taking that spot, because I think he definitely can be a free safety. Watching him play, I think he's physical enough to do it. I think he's a great, great fit for the scheme if they do switch him to free safety. So, scratched my head at the beginning of like, wow, didn't really see that one coming. Ended up watching him a lot over the weekend, and I was very surprised of his versatility, and I'm interested to see if the Dolphins do end up moving him to free safety. If they don't, he can be a very good nickel corner. He could be a really good run defender if they switch him to the nickel package. And again, I heard someone say that, this means that, in the future they're going to groom this kid to move on from X. I don't know if you guys watch football, but 60% of the time, you're in your nickel package. Or I think it's 50 to 60% somewhere in there. So even if he was a nickel corner, he would still play a lot. And especially in this defense, especially depending on what formation, what team we're playing, we had a lot of secondary members out there at a time. And obviously, we had a very low talent pool there at the time. And I'm very excited to see the secondary. And like I said, where it all shakes out. So even if he does play nickel corner, he's still going to get to impact the field and be on the field a lot. So it wasn't like they just picked someone for sub packages with their last first round pick. This is someone who's going to play either way a lot, even if he doesn't isn't moved to free safety. He's going to be on the field quite a bit. And I'm really, the thing that, like I said, that makes me excited about him is his physicality and the way he can tackle. Like I said, when we go into those nickel packages, he's going to be someone who's going to be able to affect the run because of his physical nature. So I'm excited for him. I think he's going to be a sleeper pick to watch throughout the offseason due to the fact, I guess, Dolphins fans are like, why did the Dolphins pick corner? Maybe thought he was a little bit of a reach at that pick too. But I'm excited for the player. I think he's going to be interesting to see how well he plays in this defense, especially. And Brian Flores' specialty is the back end. So I'm excited to see what he does with it. I'm not going to try to say his last name again. I think we tried it once. If we stuck the landing, we stuck the landing. I don't want to annoy you guys too much. So a little bit of a head scratcher there, but all in all, a pretty solid player. I'm interested to see how the Dolphins utilize him in the future. So let's go into day 2 of the draft in the second round. And this pick I'm totally down for. The Miami Dolphins select Robert Hunt from Louisiana Lafayette, the Raging Cajuns. A physical player. In terms of some of the things that I want to read for you guys to describe him. This comes from PFF, and this is what they had to say. Well, not say, but this is what grades they gave him. They gave him an 80 pass blocking. They gave him an 86 run blocking grade. And some of the other things that some analysts had to say about him, because it's hard to bring up stats with him. So I just want to read some things. A 4-year starter at right tackle and Coach Billy Napier's run-heavy offense. Hunt, 6'5", mustered through 7 games and missed most of the draft process in 2019 due to a severe groin injury. So again, if you don't know a lot about Robert Hunt, he did miss most of his final season and didn't get to do any of the off-season stuff to prepare for the draft due to the groin injury. But a physical player, physical run blocker, I think that's the best thing he does best, or the thing that he does best. I really want the Dolphins to play him at guard. He's a big dude, 6'5", and again, 6'5", big dude. And the best thing he does, not only watching him play, but you hear everybody else say it, the best thing he does is run block, and he does push people off the football. And he's a good athlete, too, so when you see him play. So I'm excited about this pick for a variety of different reasons. I think, and again, one of the things, not only last year, but the last 4 years, the Dolphins' offensive line especially lacks physicality. Big offensive linemen that are able to push people off the ball. We've been pushed around in the run game for a long time in Miami. The last run-dominant team we had was with the Unicorns, and they were in and out of the lineup, and we still didn't get a consistent run game with Jay Ajayi. That was the last really physical, dominant offensive line we had was 2016 when we actually went 10-6 and made the playoffs. I think the thing that I love about him is he adds that physicality to the offense and the run game, makes us bigger up front, more physical, and stronger up front to really help us in that area. Because last year, if you look at our guard play, and even when Jesse Davis slides into guard, he's never really been a physical player. He's always been a way better pass protector, in my opinion, pass blocker, than he has been a run blocker. And I'm excited to see how well he plays early on in the offseason, if we have one, and see where really this offensive line shakes out. I think he can, hopefully, to be honest with you, out of all the offensive linemen that we drafted, he can have the biggest impact on the offensive line if he's healthy. In terms of he can really transform our run game because of his strengths in college, and hopefully that translates to the NFL. I really like this pick. I think it fills a huge hole. And if really this type of player we haven't had come through here and really draft or pick in a long time. I think he's a guard. I'm excited to see where he plays, but I think his best football can be at guard. And maybe we play Jesse Davis at right tackle, who, if you go back and watch some of our games last year, Jesse Davis did a really good job at right tackle. One of the more underrated performances of that year. I think if you had to rank the third best Dolphin on that offense, or at least the most consistent, I think it would have been Jesse Davis. So I'm excited to see how this offensive line shakes out. And even I was surprised. Again, if you go back, like I said, if you go back and watch Jesse Davis, I think he played very, very well at right tackle. So I think this is a really good pick. I think he, again, fills a huge hole for this team. He was obviously the first pick of the second round. I think I forgot to mention that. And I think he hopefully can make this offensive line that's been a weak, sorry, getting pushed around offensive line in the run game for a few years now. Hopefully he can change the attitude of that offensive line, and we can start pushing people up front, because I think that's the best thing he does. And it's nice to get a physical guard like this. It's really interesting to see how this interior of the offensive line is going to shake out. With some of the picks that we picked in this draft, even last year picking Michael Dieter, the competition for the interior and the depth and the talent level of that depth and the talent pool of the interior of the offensive line has not been this high in like at least 40 years. So this is the most talented group of offensive linemen, especially in the interior, this team has had on this roster in a long time. So that makes me very excited, and I'm excited to see where the depth chart shakes out. So this next pick, and again, our second pick in the second round, this is one of my favorite picks of the draft. This is one of definitely, I think next to Tua, this is my next, second or third favorite pick of this draft. And that's Raekwon Davis, the defensive tackle from Alabama. I know a lot of people are, point out the fact that he had 8.5 sacks in 2017, and his production kind of tailed off after that. And people like, oh, he regressed. Well, maybe his stats regressed, but I think the thing he does best in college just stayed the same, and that's be a player that can be a huge asset in the run defense. I think he can. He was a great run defender in college, and that's why I really like this pick. again, another pick that emphasizes the line of scrimmage for this team. And I love this pick because it adds to a defensive line that's getting scarier and scarier by the minute. And I think he adds something that this defensive line needed in a really good run defender at the defensive tackle spot. Now, remember, we took Christian Wilkins last year in the first round. And he had a slower start to his career than we might have wanted to. But towards the end there, man, he really started to get going. And he really, really was getting better. And I'm very excited to see the interior of this defensive line play. I think he could be one of the better ones in the AFC East, depending on how far along Raekwon Davis is in his development. But he's one of the best run defenders in the game. And he's adding to a Dolphins run defense that has been abysmal, that's been very up and down, again, the last 3 or 4 years. And hopefully, with the addition of him, with Christian Wilkins, Davon Godchaux has been playing much better over the last 2 years. I'm very excited to see how well this front does against the run. And it really helps us in the division when you think about some of the things that the Bills want to do in the Jets, or not the Jets, but the Bills and the Patriots want to do, and that's run the football up there in Foxborough and up there in Buffalo. And I think this helps us against our division rivals because we've been pushed around by them, especially in the run game over the last few years. That's one of the bigger reasons we've struggled in Buffalo is our inability to stop the run. And I think he really helps us do that. The first time I heard of Raekwon Davis, and this was actually before the draft, and I actually started, I watched him a little bit. I watched him more over the weekend. But Chris Sims, if you're not familiar, he has this really good podcast. It's very different from some of the other sports media you consume. That's why I really like it that much. It's not yelling, it's not screaming, it's not this argument, title, headline-based sports media that ESPN has. It's very in the weeds. It's very in depth in terms of football and breaking down players. And he always does his top 5. With each positional group, he does his top 5 players going into the draft. He did defensive tackles. This is not the first time I heard of Raekwon Davis, but this is the first time I really became interested in him. He was 4th on his defensive tackle rankings, and compared him to, and this is, Chris Sims, I think is a very smart football analysis. Compared him to Richard Seymour and Muhammad Wilkerson, and when he said that, I was like, I gotta watch more, of Raekwon Davis. And that's big praise from someone who I really do respect his football opinion of. And I disagree with him on things too. He's not a huge fan of Tua. I am. That didn't waver my opinion of Tua at all. I think he's wrong about Tua. But Raekwon Davis, that's very high praise from someone I think knows a lot about the game. And those are two. Obviously, Muhammad Wilkerson kind of flamed out due to the fact that he's a terrible locker room guy. But Richard Seymour, a very productive defensive lineman for a long time for New England. And if he can channel any of that for us, we're going to have one of the better, turnarounds in terms of a defensive front in a very long time. I'm excited to see those guys play next to each other, Raekwon Davis, Christian Wilkins, and Davon Godchaux. I'm excited to see what that looks like for the future of this team and for the future of this franchise. And again, to say one more thing before we move on from Raekwon Davis, he has shown pass rush ability, but that's not why we drafted him. Not to be Aaron Donald. We drafted him to really be a force in the middle of our defense, where we've been weak in the past and been pushed around up the middle of this defense in the run game, to really fortify that side of the defense, get teams in more 3rd and 10s, 3rd and 11s, 3rd and 9s, 3rd and 8s, and really let our secondary eat. And I think that's what Raekwon Davis can do, is set the other offense back, in long yardage situations, and that's something that we haven't been able to do on a consistent basis. So I think he helps us there, which then will help us in the pass game. And I think his addition, and again, you think about the additions that this team has made to that front 7 with Shaq Lawson, Emmanuel Ogbah, Raekwon Davis. Over the last few years, you have Christian Wilkins. I mean, this defensive line has been built, and hopefully, and again, that's something we needed, was depth on that defensive line, especially in the interior. And I think we got ourselves a sneaky good player that I think not a lot of people. Again, I think people just look at his stats and maybe are a little bit underwhelmed, but I think he has potential, and especially with Brian Flores, man. And obviously played in a similar scheme with Nick Saban. I'm excited to see. I think his impact on this defense is going to be a little bit under the radar, but I think it's going to be felt in the 2020 season. One of my favorite picks of the draft. I think he is a pretty underrated player. And hopefully I don't get the order of these wrong, but I believe we're going into the 3rd round here. Yeah. And this is a pick that I was is a very interesting pick. And again, the secondary competition, man, is going to be really interesting to see how things shake out. We're going into the third round here, and the Miami Dolphins' third round selection is from Texas. The Texas safety, Brandon Jones. His career at Texas, I forgot to give you Raekwon Davis' stats. I apologize, ladies and gentlemen. But just to give you, Raekwon Davis had 11 career sacks, over 20 TFLs in his career at Alabama, just to give you that. Moving on to Brandon Jones, the Texas from safety. The Texas safety, Brandon Jones. Now, I really like this player. I think he's a scheme fit. And what you really did see him do in the Big 12, which is obviously a very offensive-heavy conference. Not a lot of defenses play down conference, obviously. But when you watch Brandon Jones, he plays a lot of different positions. And he lined up in the slot as the nickelback a lot in Texas, which I thought right away when I saw that, I was like, yeah, this is a Brian Flores guy. It's the same thing we just talked about. To play safety in his defense, you have to be able to, play man-to-man on slot corners, on running backs, on tight ends. And whether you think he did that well enough or not at Texas, they still asked him to do that in the Big 12 quite a bit. So I thought that was really interesting. He's got great hands. His stats at Texas, he had 3 interceptions, 14 tackles for loss, and this is his career, by the way. This is not one season, or he'd be, this would be an insane one season. 2 forced fumbles, and he's a really good athlete. I think he can affect special teams right away. He had 2 blocks in the punt game. He's had some returns of the punt game too. Can affect special teams a little bit. Obviously, Jakeem Grant's been dropping balls for us, and on special teams for a while. Maybe Brandon Jones can come in and give us a little bit of a spark because he's a really good athlete. Again, very versatile, and I think it's very important for this scheme. So he's a scheme fit, and I think there's a really good theme, especially with the defensive players in this draft. They're all scheme fits. So it's not like we're drafting someone who's a talented player but doesn't fit what we're trying to do. They're all, and I think this isn't being stated enough, they're all very cohesive and fit, a piece to the puzzle that hopefully when they all come together, it's not like they're going out of their comfort zone when he comes into this defense. This is something that he did a lot at Texas, play a lot of different positions, and that's what Brian Flores wants you to do. So I think he fits right in with that, right in with the scheme, what we really, really want to do. He's an athletic safety, big dude, and he's a great tackler too. This is someone who misses. He's very, very, very good tackler. And again, someone who, like I said, played some, lined up over the slot receiver a good amount in Texas. Played strong safety, played free safety. And I'm excited. A smart player. I think you all heard the thing. It was like, I wanted, I think it was the playbooks for all 32 teams. So he's a smarter safety, works hard, and just fits what Brian Flores wants. Big fan of Brandon Jones, watching him play. I think he fits with the scheme. Again, I think it was a good pick, good scheme fit. All right, moving on to the next pick. Maybe someone Dolphins fans haven't heard a lot of. Probably not the biggest name, but if you go watch him, just go watch him play, because I think this particular player is gonna have a real chance in this particular scheme. He's actually bigger than you think he is while watching him at North Carolina. This next player is Jason Strowbridge, 6'5", 285 pounds. Doesn't look like it at all. He looks like Chandler Jones, for God's sakes. That weight does not show on him at all. Big defensive lineman from North Carolina. His career stats at North Carolina, a ton of tackles, 123. 22 tackles for loss. Close to 10 almost every single year that he played. And 10 sacks in his career. So, again, not the production. If you look at his stats in terms of sack production, not something that you're going to pop off the screen if you're just looking up his stats. But if you actually watch him play, he reminds me of Dietrich Wise, Trey Flowers. He his game in terms of the things that he does on the field is very similar to Michael Bennett, where they move him inside and out. I think he has underrated skills as a pass rusher. If they played him on the outside most of the time or exclusively on the outside, I think his sack production would have went up a little bit. But nonetheless, man, he can affect the game inside, outside, very versatile. Obviously, that's something that Brian Flores really, really wants. I think he adds a lot of size and physicality to the defensive front. And again, I think the best thing he does is affect the run game. Strong player. and gets in the backfield. Sneaky speed too. Sneaky speed. Like I said, if you watch, I just read you, he's almost 300 pounds and 6'5". You would think he's maybe a chubbier looking. No, man, he looks like a superhero, for God's sakes. So I'm excited for this pick. I think he makes, definitely adds depth to the defensive line. And this is a defensive line that lack talent and definitely lack depth. That's for sure. And they have really infused talent in free agency and in the draft. They did a really good job of adding players that are scheme fits and that can really thrive in the scheme and this defense. And I think that's something that's not being talked about enough. These are not just players that, were just picked because, they show traits of this or that. These are players that are going to come to this defense and not have problems acclimating to the scheme at all. These are players that have done it in college of what they're going to be asked to do in the NFL. And I think there's no real better. This is a great example of that in Strobridge, who is going to come in and, do pretty much the same thing he did at North Carolina. It's just really affect the run game, get in the backfield, move inside and out, and be a game wrecker that way. And again, really has the same style as Michael Bennett. I think he reminds me more of a Trey Flowers or a Dietrich Wise in terms of some of those players from New England. Just a big defensive lineman that can get in the backfield. That's really the best thing he does. So I really love this pick. Like I said, I cannot say enough. The Dolphins have done a good job of getting both lines of scrimmage more talent and getting them back on their feet, man. They've done a really, really good job. I'm so excited to see this defense. With how well this coaching staff did with no talent last year, adding these young, talented players to both sides of the line of scrimmage. You mesh this defensive line, this new talent-infused defensive line with the secondary that we've built. Excuse me. It just gets me really excited. It really, really, really does. I'm very, very excited to see this defense. And again, it got bigger, stronger, more physical. And that's something, especially with the size of this defense. You look at the Jeff Ireland, the Dennis Hickeys, the Mike Tannenbaums of the world. They really prioritize one-dimensional players that didn't do a lot except one thing. Like, these guys are just pass rushers, basically. I mean, seriously, with Robert Quinn, Cameron Wake was never the best, in my opinion. All-around player. I think he was a great pass rusher. He was a good run defender. He wasn't a very versatile player when it came to that. He wasn't the greatest athlete. I love Cameron. I'm not trying to hate on Cameron Wake, okay? Cameron Wake is Cameron Wake. He's one of the best players in the franchise history. But we've never been a big defensive line that's been able to play bully ball. And I really feel like this defensive line is a big, athletic, versatile, can, really move in and out of different packages. I'm very excited to see this defensive line come together. It's going to be really, really exciting. And again, you might look at Strobridge's production. Just go watch him play. Very similar to Michael Bennett. Similar to, again, like a Dietrich Wise or a Trey Flowers in terms of how he plays the game of football. I really, really like that pick. Moving on to the next pick, the Dolphins selected in the 2020 NFL Draft. Probably my second or third favorite pick of the draft. I really love this pick. This is another player that's going to add to the defensive front. But this player, if you're looking for sack production, and you look at the stats, and maybe that's all you're doing with this, some of the draft picks in this draft, this guy is going to stand out to you. This next pick is Curtis Weaver from Boise State. And one of the things I want to say before we get into the stats we'll get into the stats first. This is Curtis Weaver's career. One of the better pass rushers in the draft, for sure, dude. You talk about a technician and someone that is just all around a really good pass rusher. And that's something Brian Flores brought up right away when he did his press conference, and it shows when you watch him play. His 3 years at Boise State, he accumulated 34 sacks, 47 tackles for loss. 47 and a half tackles for loss. This guy is an absolute gamer. He had an interception, 3 forced fumbles in his career at Boise State. Just a straight baller, dude. I have no idea why he fell, I think, to the 5th round. I have no idea. That kind of production is first-round level production. Okay? And when you watch him play, man, here, and this is something I wanted to say, because I don't want to forget about it, because this is something I was thinking about when I was watching him play. If you watch Charles Harris at Missouri, and then you watch Curtis Weaver at Boise State, Curtis Weaver is a 1,000 times better prospect than Charles Harris ever was. Even as a pass rusher, Curtis Weaver is a bajillion times better as a prospect. And Charles Harris is someone we picked in the first round. Curtis Weaver is a 5th round pick. I mean, seriously, the noticeable difference, and I mean this, between Curtis Weaver and Charles Harris is undeniable. I wish I would have pulled up Charles Harris's production in college, because it comes, and especially against the run, dude, Charles Harris can't hold a candle to Curtis Weaver. I mean, that was obviously a huge reason why Charles Harris wasn't selected higher, or, you know, that's one of the biggest knocks out of him coming out of college, was he was very bad against the run. He just wasn't a big dude. Curtis Weaver is a very large man. He's 6'3", 265 pounds, and unlike Strobridge, he looks like it. He looks like a bigger outside linebacker. He doesn't look like your typical outside linebacker who's a dominant pass rusher in college. He's a very different type of a body type. But again, when you talk about unreal production in college, 47 and a half tackles for loss, and 34 sacks is just out of this world, man. Just what a career that he had at Boise State. And he gets me hyped up because he's the best pure pass rusher in the draft that we selected. In terms of his ceiling, he's definitely got the best ceiling when it comes to pass rush. I mean, if you were concerned about that on this Dolphins defense, he can provide it, man. This is someone who can come in and just be, and again, he fits the scheme too. Fits the scheme 1,000%. You know, he was good against the run, I thought, and his production shows that. Not great against the run, but good against the run. Not as good as the other players were, obviously. He's just not as strong and as physical as those other guys, but he is a really good all-around outside linebacker / defensive end. I think we're definitely going to stand him up in this defense and just let him go to work. When running backs try to block him, he literally bulldozes them. I mean, it's like he runs through them like a car, and the running back's like a fly, and it just gets squashed. I mean, he is so fun to watch, man. So fun to watch. Probably my second or third favorite. I mean, it's tied with Raekwon Davis. I love Curtis Weaver, man. I love Curtis Weaver. Watching him play, it just gets me excited to see this defense come together. With the emergence of Vince Beagle and Van Ginkel at the end of last year, who I thought Andrew Van Ginkel played really well the last few games of last year, and you add Weaver to that, dude. It just gets me really, 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 really excited, and I'm surprised he lasted to the 5th round. I don't understand. I guess maybe because of his body type. You know, people complain about his athleticism. I didn't see that when I watched him play. I saw a really good athlete and someone who finishes. Clearly, he does, and especially in the run game too. I mean, he brought running backs down. Split some double team. I mean, he's again, when running backs and tight ends try to block him, they look like children, for God's sakes. I can't say enough about Curtis Weaver. Again, unreal production at Boise State, and when you watch him play, he's just fun to watch. He's just a gamer, man. And I think he could have, again, this could be like a Preston Williams situation where he has the most production and impact on the defense despite him being a 5th round pick. Like, I think this guy could become a fan favorite. And like I said, a way better prospect than Charles Harris ever was coming out of college. I think that's undeniable. So let's move on to the last pick. I don't know if we're going to get to the thank you name, man. Maybe we'll get to, I'm definitely going to save questions because I know we got a lot of them. But let's get to this last pick. I should have finished that thought. I'm going to save questions for next week for sure. But let's get to this next pick. And Malcolm Perry. I want to get to the thank you name, so we're not going to spend a ton of time on Malcolm Perry. But Malcolm Perry, obviously a Navy player. If you watch the Army Navy game every year, it's like going back in time and watching an old football team play. It's very simple. It's very, it's the wishbone. It's, we're basically running every play. There's not a lot of passing, and when they do pass, it looks very awkward. So when you watch, first of all, Malcolm Perry, the thing that stands out to me, and let me read you some of his production. It's in college. Especially, I want to read you his last year at Navy. And I know it's Navy, and I know it's Navy, so maybe this doesn't mean a lot to you, but still, it's crazy production. He had over 2,000 rushing yards last year. Okay, and he had 21 rushing touchdowns. Okay, so that is insane. He averaged over 6 yards a carry. He played quarterback, receiver, running back. He's played all the different positions at Navy. Really fun to watch. Explosive. I'm talking, the first thing that you see when you watch Malcolm Perry is he's very explosive. And And I forgot about Blake Ferguson. He's the long snapper that we took. Blake Ferguson. We're gonna skip over Blake because he's a long snapper. Who cares? We picked him in the sixth round. Who cares? We're talking about Malcolm Perry right now. Malcolm Perry, just a gamer, man. And the first thing that you think of is just explosion. And I know that the Dolphins drafted him as a running back. I think that's definitely his natural position. One of the first things that I thought of how we could utilize him is, again, as a gadget player, like a Taysom Hill, who come in, maybe run some option stuff in the red zone. You really just want to get him in space as much as possible with this guy, because he is explosive, dude. His startup it's insane. I watched his it was the East-West Shrine game. The one time that they did run an option play with him at the quarterback position, he took, I think, 80 yards for a touchdown. I don't know how long the touchdown was, but it was like a 60, 80-yarder. And he just cleared everyone there. He's an explosive running back. Had a great production in college. I mean, he's obviously a Navy player, but just explosive, man. Explosive player. I'm very excited to see what he could do in training camp and in preseason. Just watching him play, and a very explosive player. Actually, forgot about a player. Skipped over him. I apologize for that. Solomon Kinley. And again, I love this pick as well. I think we got him in the fourth. I think it was the fourth round. I can't believe I almost forgot about him. Solomon Kinley, just in terms of stats, obviously it's hard to get stats for offensive linemen, but going into the 2019 season, Solomon Kinley was the highest graded pass blocking guard in the SEC with an 88.3. So if you're a big PFF guy, he really scored high on the pass blocking side of things. And again, I love my SEC Big Ten linemen. Watching him play at Georgia, and I thought he was a good run. I mean, he's blocked for very productive running backs there at Georgia. So I think, underrated run blocker. Again, was very highly graded in pass blocking. Adds a lot of competition to the interior of this offensive line. It's going to be, again, interesting with the addition of Kinley, Robert Hunt, who I think I would love to just us try him at guard, man, because I think he can just push people around. Dieter, we added Ted Carey. Obviously, I think Ted's going to play center. Eric Flowers, we saw Shaq Calhoun, who is an undrafted rookie, played well in some of the snaps that he did take, especially in preseason. Again, they've just really done a great job of adding depth and infused a lot of talent to both sides of the line of scrimmage. And I love this draft for it. And I love Solomon Kinley, obviously a really, really, really nice pass protector there. And it's going to be interesting to see the competition for this offensive line, man. It's got talent, it's got depth. I'm excited to see. This is the most depth it's had, and even dating back to 2016 with the Unicorns. After this draft, this is the most depth it's had in a long time. And so yeah, I love the Solomon Kinley pick. Again, if you're a big PFF guy, really high scores on pass protecting. My mind's going a million miles an hour right now, because I'm almost out of time here, and we haven't even gotten to Matt Breida yet. So yeah, I love the Solomon Kinley pick. Hopefully I didn't forget. I think we got everybody. I think we definitely did. Definitely not gonna be able to get to the fan Q&A yet, guys. I know you guys asked like 40 questions, and I will tomorrow or the next day. I'm just gonna do a whole fan Q&A on the draft, for God's sakes, or I'll just save it for the next podcast. But we're not gonna be able to answer fans' questions. Love the Solomon Kinley. I hate to rush the Solomon Kinley pick because I really like it. And I love what it does for the team and what it adds for that offensive line room. But Michael Dieter has a ton of competition, man. And so does Eric Flowers. Even though we just gave him that contract, these guys aren't just gonna be able to start because they have nobody behind them. I mean, they're gonna have a lot of talented players nipping at their heels. And the last thing in terms of things that you guys have to know about, obviously the Dolphins traded one of their fifth-round picks for Matt Breida with the San Francisco 49ers. And I loved this. And one of the things that I didn't love that the Dolphins, one of the things that I wish they did a little bit more of was be more aggressive with the draft board. They had all this capital, and they really didn't move it around, I think, enough, at least for my liking. I thought they could have traded up in some areas and gotten some, been a little bit more aggressive in that and just working the board. But this is one of those situations where they actually did do that, and they gave up a pick for Matt Breida, who, again, if we left this draft without a running back, it would have been very disappointing. Definitely would have affected, my likings of this draft, but they ended up getting a Matt Breida, who's a proven NFL player, obviously a home run hitter. Everybody knows who Matt Breida is. If you watch the 49ers play, especially early on in the season, you know who Matt Breida is. He's an electric player, great in the open space, great in open field. You could just put a highlight tape of him making the free safety miss and then him going for like an 80-yard touchdown. I mean, he's just, again, a home run hitter, and really nice contrast to Jordan Howard. We have a really nice thunder and lightning duo in the backfield. With this new look offensive line, it's going to be scary with those two running the football. I'm so excited to watch this offense, so excited to see how this offense... I'm actually excited for an Dolphins offensive line. I'm actually excited for that, which is insane. And I'm very excited for the Dolphins defensive line as well. And I just love the addition of Matt Breida, an electric player, very underrated. He plays with a lot of power, too. That's something that's underrated about his game, despite him being a home run hitter. And really, and again, that's something we talked about leading up to this draft, is really getting someone who can produce coming out of the backfield. And I really like Matt Breida, underrated in the pass game. Kyle Shanahan used him in a lot of different ways, whether that's screens or, him running a Texas route coming out of the backfield. They really utilize him in a lot of different ways in the passing game, and I think the Chan Gailey and the Dolphins can do the same thing. So he brings a lot to the offense. I'm excited to see him run behind this new, big, powerful offensive line that the Dolphins are building in Miami. I'm very excited to see how they look when they come together. And my overall thoughts of this draft and what I thought about it, again, I think some of the negatives, Noah's the pick of Igbinoghene. I'm not gonna try it, but you guys know who I'm talking about. My least favorite pick of the draft, wasn't a huge need there, but obviously Chris Greer and Brian Flores says that was their number one player on their board. I still feel like they're building the team how they want to build it, which I love. I mean, they're building the secondary on in, and they did a great job of building the front too. That was, to me, my least favorite pick, because did it make that much sense for the Dolphins at that point? That's why I think it was such a head scratcher. All the other picks I loved. Austin Jackson was a necessity pick, but he's still a talented player, and anybody who says it was a reach to me is crazy. I mean, literally, that is legit where he was projected to go. I have no idea why people keep saying that. He was literally projected to go there. There was 50 million mock drafts with him going to us at 18, so I don't know why people are complaining about that now. But regardless, and excuse me, I think the only reach that you can really say is a reach in terms of where he went is Noah at the end of the first round. To me, that's the only reach. All these other guys, I see why the Dolphins picked them. I know that Robert Hunt, he had the injured groin, but the Dolphins picked they picked Kinley in the same draft, and they signed a bunch of guards too. They have Eric Flowers. They picked Michael Dieter last year. They have Ted Karras coming in from New England. So even if he gets hurt for some reason, they still have talent there. So it's not like this is a boom or bust. Like, the Dolphins, if he does get hurt, it's going to be a problem. I still feel like they did a good job of continuing to infuse talent to that offensive line. So to me, that's not an issue with the whole injury with Robert Hunt. I just don't see the reaches. That was reach. I don't think a lot of these, some of these picks were, outrageous reaches. So for me, that doesn't affect, the only negatives to me that you could point out, I do think Noah was a little bit of a reach at the end of the first round. And I do think that we could have worked the board a little bit more with some of the, we had so many picks. I felt like we would move up and down a little bit more than we did, but we still got Breida for the 49ers, which was a very, an outstanding move by the front office. They just get it. They filled all the holes, to me, that this roster, they, infused the defensive line with talent and the offensive line with talent. That's literally what I wanted them to do. Like I said, my dream scenario would be them to take two tackles in the first round if they wanted to. And they really, to me, addressed the needs that I thought they needed to address, which is the offensive and defensive line. And we didn't even get to the fact that, I really wanted to defend them not taking a receiver in this draft, because that's a whole nother conversation. But in saying all of that, they addressed the running back position, they addressed the offensive line, they addressed the defensive line, and I feel like the players that they picked to address them, I liked pretty much all of the decisions they made. So I'm going to give the Dolphins, if I had to give out my draft grade and my feelings on this, an A-. Not to mention they got their franchise quarterback, for God's sake. So I was very happy with this draft. Hopefully you guys were too. I'm very excited for this season, and hopefully we get that season. I'm excited to go for that AFC's title, and I am Skaggs383, and I'll see you guys in the next one.